Hello and welcome to another edition of Cranky Gun Reviews. I wanted to talk a little bit about collecting. And throughout the tenure or the duration of my time with firearms, all of the guns that I've purchased have been things that I wanted that were cool, that, were dream guns of mine that I've had in the back of my head since I was a kid or from watching movies and things like that. But rarely have I ever come across something that was kind of a special edition. So the whole reason I'm going down this path is, a while ago I was looking for a Model 640 Smith & Wesson, because in talking to the guys over at Revolver Roundup, they say that the 640 is probably the best J-frame revolver ever made. It's based on the Centennial platform, so it's an internally hammer-fired revolver. Usually they came in either 38 Special or 357 Magnum, depending on the generation of them that you bought. So I've always kept my eyes open for a 640, and they don't really show up that frequently because they're such nice guns. Everybody buys them once they go on sale. Well, not that long ago, I found a Model 640 in a local shop, and you really can't tell much information looking online. They don't have pictures of the guns in this particular shop. They just had a listing that said Smith & Wesson 640, and it said ported barrel. So now when I think ported barrel on a J-frame, I automatically think Magna porting, or I think something from the Performance Center, like a 640 Pro that might have been done at the factory. So I figured it was worth taking a look at. And when I went into the shop, I asked to see it, and they pulled it out of the case, and this is what they had. Now, again, first glance, Smith & Wesson J-frame, it does have a ported barrel. It doesn't say Performance Center anywhere on this gun, and it didn't really have any other markings other than a W on the barrel, and then it says 38 Special on the barrel. Now, if you look at the profile of the barrel, this is not a standard J-frame barrel. So my thoughts going through my head as I'm in the shop, okay, it's a Model 640. It had rubber grips on it. I think it had Hogue monogrips on it, which I like Hogue monogrips, but the middle finger groove was actually shaved out of it. Somebody shaved it off with a razor blade to try to get rid of it, because for whatever reason they only wanted the nostril here and they wanted the bottom bump on the grip. And this is what the grips look like when I picked it up. Again, you can see that that middle finger groove has been completely shaved off the grip. Still not exactly sure why somebody would want to do this. So they had shaved the grip down, and there's some scratches here and there on the back strap, and the gun was filthy. When I looked at it, it had all kinds of lint in the barrel. I couldn't even see the rifling in the barrel and things like that. So I'm trying to get more picky about the guns that I buy. I don't want to keep buying just run-of-the-mill handguns. So I asked the guy behind the counter if he would take it out back and clean it out with a bore brush. So he ran a bore brush down the barrel, cleaned out the cylinders, and then brought it back. And, I looked it over for quite a while. It has a pretty good trigger, and this is safety check, so there's nothing in the cylinders. It has a pretty good trigger. I measured it. I think it's around 6.5 or 6.7 pounds, something like that. So the trigger's pretty good on it. And, I'm looking it over. Like I said, it's dirty. It's got some scratches here and there. There's some scuffing on the cylinder, and it does have a ported barrel. It has a drift adjustable front sight on it, and the latch on the cylinder looks different than what I'd seen before. And I knew that W marking on the barrel meant something. I had no idea what it meant. So I almost passed up on this. I actually told the guy I didn't want to buy it. I was going to buy a 638 instead, because that was really inexpensive. I think it was like $325 or something like that for a 638, which is pretty cheap even for a used 638, and it was in really clean, nice condition. But then, he went to put it back in the case, and he said, oh, this is a no-lock version. And I said, well, let me see it again. So he pulled it out. Sure enough, it's a no-lock, so it is a Model 60, no dash, so it's a no-lock version, which means it came from somewhere in the 1990s. I looked up the serial number on this. I think it's like a 94, 95, somewhere around that time range. So mid-90s, no lock, which, again, this is right around the time when they started putting locks on all their revolvers in the Clinton era. So it's a no lock, no dash Model 60. It does not have a pin barrel. So again, it's after 1982, and these are all the things I'm thinking when I'm in the store. And I started looking at it a little bit closer, and it has a polished face on the trigger, so it looked like somebody had done some work on the trigger. It definitely has a nice smooth trigger pull. And again, the porting on the barrel, the fact that it does not have a lock on the side of the frame, and the fact that the profile of this barrel is very different than a standard J-frame, again, along with the porting, made me start thinking that this might have been like a custom shotgun, again, or maybe it was an early Performance Center, although it doesn't say Performance Center anywhere on it. I thought maybe it was a 640 Pro, like back in the 90s, maybe they didn't do a whole lot of crazy stuff on the 640 Pros. So I bought it. And when I started doing research on what that W meant, I came up with some very interesting things. So at the end of this video, or in a minute, I'm going to roll in some footage of a magazine article about this particular J-frame. But the ports on this barrel are different than Magna porting. Most Magna ports, they come in on both sides of the barrel and they're at an angle to kind of push the muzzle down as you're shooting. These ones are directly over the top of the barrel, and these also are slightly tapered. So the porting on this is actually called Hybra port, H-Y-B-R-A port. And those are special because the design of the Hybra port system is actually tapered like a funnel. And that was actually patented by a guy that had a patent on a bunch of rocketry. And one guy has a patent to use that Hybra port system on firearms. His name is Weigand, Jack Weigand. And that's really where the story gets interesting, because this gun was actually purchased brand new in the 1990s and shipped to a shop in Pennsylvania that Jack Weigand run. And I didn't even know who Jack Weigand was. Apparently back in the day, he was a big name that did a lot of special work on revolvers, because that's really what he was good at. He also made a lot of rails for different pistols. So he's a precision machinist, and he was a firearms enthusiast. He did a lot of work with the Taurus custom guns in the 90s as well, but he had his own shop, and this is really what he worked on. So let's look at exactly what this gun is and what custom work it has done on it, and why I think I really got a pretty good deal on this thing. So in my searching online, I found this article from American Handgunner magazine in 1994. And this chronicles all of the information about this particular handgun, about Jack Weigand in his shop and all the custom work that was done to this thing. You can see there pictures of the internals that have been polished, the porting, the nice grips that this gun has on it, and a whole bunch of other add-ons that we have in this particular gun. So this is worth a read if you want to go look at it. I'm not going to go through the entire article in this particular video, but for me, as I was reading this article, I started getting a larger and larger smile on my face. They did all kinds of custom work and polishing and tuning to this firearm. And then they also did a side-by-side shooting comparison test with a standard barrel versus the Hybra port barrel. So this is a pretty interesting read, and you can find this article on jackweigand.com. There's actually, the whole article is posted. So let's start looking into the Jack Weigand touches on this gun and why it is really a special Smith & Wesson Model 640. So when preparing this video, I took some liberty at trying to set up my gun in similar poses to what was in the magazine article. I just thought it would be really neat to try to copy the same type of pictures that they had. Again, makes it a little bit more exciting for me because this is the first really cool gun that I've ever had. Now, if we look at some of the features that they added, you can see here on the cylinder crane, they actually added a ball detent to allow it to lock up even tighter. And this is something that other gun manufacturers have done. It also has a mating surface cut into the frame so that that ball detent can nest in that location, again, giving a tighter lockup. There was some polishing work done in the cylinder, which is not really something you can see from these particular pictures, but it is pretty cool to know that the inside of the cylinder has been polished. Here you can see the Shyland barrel that Jack Weigand put on these with those hybrid ports in the top of the barrel, that dovetailed front sight, and once again, those rocket scientist inspired hybrid ports, which are tapered to keep the muzzle rise to a minimum. From this side profile, you can see that different cylinder release. It's very different from any that I've ever seen before. And again, you can see that dovetail front sight. The article goes on to say that Jack Weigand did a polished job on the internals on this. And again, it does render this thing a very smooth, crisp trigger with about a 6.5 pound double action. Here you can see the top of that barrel with the hybrid porting, which again are tapered like a jet nozzle, which, coupled with the fact this is a 2.25-inch barrel, keeps the muzzle rise to a minimum. The face of the trigger has been highly polished to make it extremely smooth and easy to pull. Again, this being double action only, having a smooth trigger is very, very nice to shoot. The article talks about trying different grips on this 640, and in this picture you do see the Uncle Mike's combat grips. Luckily for me, I happen to have a set of those because those are my favorite factory grips. The article mentions that the wood boot grips that they have on this gun are designed and built by Craig Spiegel, who is a big name in handguns, and ironically, he also designed the Uncle Mike's combat grips. Now, the wood grips I have on mine are not Craig Spiegel grips, but these are some similar boot grips that I bought from a company on eBay, and I really like the look of them. It really classes up the gun. Now, back in 1994, if you wanted this gun, you would have to buy a brand new Smith & Wesson 640, ship it to Jack Weigand's shop in Pennsylvania, and pay an additional $300 to have a new barrel put on, have the internal polish work done, the trigger face polished, the cylinder crane detent put on, the nice grips put on it, and just to have the whole thing polished up nicely and tuned to basically perfection. Now, if you were going to do the same thing today, if you bought a brand new Model 640, they cost $819 on Smith & Wesson's website, and the inflation equivalent of $300 in 1994 is around $679 today. So for the equivalent in today's money to get this same type of work done to a Smith & Wesson 640, you're talking somewhere around almost $1,500. And I think that's a little bit crazy, but honestly, if you wanted to be a baller back in 1994 and get the best and smoothest pistol out there, you would probably go to somebody like Jack Weigand and get this done. You can certainly buy a 640 Pro today, and that would retail for around $959. So really not that much more to just buy the Performance Center Smith & Wesson 640 Pro today rather than sending it out. But honestly, you're not going to have a legend like Jack Weigand work on your gun. And again, this just makes me really giddy to know that I have a piece of history from the 1990s, from a handgun legend, and now I can say that I have a gun that was in a magazine article. Although not my gun, but one exactly like this. And I did get a chance to take it out to the range and shoot it. Ironically, the day I went out there, I only had 10 rounds left, and I can tell you that the hybrid porting really does its job at keeping the muzzle down, but boy, oh boy, is this thing loud. So thanks for joining me on another edition of Cranky Gun Reviews and yet another Revolver video. Again, I mentioned Revolver Roundup at the beginning of this video, and that crew and myself are actually going to be doing kind of a shoot-off competition with my 640 versus Mutton Chop 640. I hope you join me to watch that when it comes out. And I really hope that some of you might have some stories with a Weigand special handgun. If you do, please drop them down in the comments. I would love to hear stories from the old days when we had custom guns flying off the shelf from Jack Weigand's shop. Have a great day. God bless America. Support your 2A rights. Make sure you get out there and shoot. And you remember, if someone asks you to give up some of your freedom for the greater good, remind them that freedom is always the greater good.